Today we're joined by Canton, Massachusetts native Rob Flynn, former Harvard hockey player who went on to a great professional hockey career before getting into technology sales. He tells us a little bit about his journey from a big company to building many different small startups, including his most recent venture, LinkSquares, which just raised a $150 million Series C. I'm J.R. Butler, co-founder of the Shift Group, and you're listening to Merchants of Change. This is a podcast about transferring the skills and behaviors we acquire as athletes into being a professional technology salesperson. Each week, we'll introduce you to a top performer who will help us understand how they became professional merchants of change. What's up, kid?
Yeah, what's going on?
How we doing?
Super pumped for this one.
I know, this is a good one. We got Rob Flynn, Canton native, Harvard University grad, the Holy Cross of Cambridge. Unreal.
We've been waiting to say that all day.
I have, man. I have it written down right here. That's what I knew was going to be my first line. So everyone, we're gonna, as usual, we're gonna get into Rob's background and his athletic career a little bit. We're gonna talk about his transition to being an adult and getting into tech sales, and then we have a couple really important topics that are close to my heart that we're gonna cover, and Rob's heart, and John's too, I think. So this is gonna be a really good conversation. So we gotta start at Harvard, man. Like, you know, you're a Boston kid. Got to go to one of the most prestigious universities in the world. How'd you end up at Harvard, my man? Like, I want to know right from there. What was it like pulling on the sweater? How'd you get there? Like, tell us about that.
Yeah. I grew up, my cousin Kevin O'Sullivan was captain of BU in '93. So I grew up going to BU hockey games, thought I was going to go to BU. And then, as I started to play and get closer to college, I had started to get offers from Ivy League schools. I was at Milton Academy before I went out to the under-18 national team and played out there. And while I was out there, committed to Harvard. But I remember talking to my cousin. He was like, "Listen, if you don't go to Harvard, you're an idiot. Like, you have the opportunity to do that. Like, why would you not do that?" So it was pretty clear that once Harvard came knocking, that's what I was going to do. Being able to stay in Boston, play in the bean pot, do all the stuff that I wanted to do, and be able to go to Harvard was a pretty cool experience. So it was an easy choice in the end in a lot of ways. So. Luckily because of hockey, right? Like, hockey is what got me there, and that's was able to had good grades and everything like that. But if it weren't for hockey, it just would have been another person.
I was going to ask Rob, like, Harvard. I think everybody thinks it's wicked hard. What was your GPA when you were there? How'd you do?
I have a degree.
That's good.
That's what counts. No, I mean, like I was there during the time frame where they were cracking down on what they call grade inflation too. So I always point back to that and say that they were trying to deflate GPAs at that time. But I mean, like, obviously I was economics major at Harvard, and played a lot of hockey too. But the value of Harvard is really the people you meet there, and the other students, and the networks and the connection that you can create. And also something I talk about with our sales team here at LinkSquares a lot is, like, there also the expectations that people have coming out of there, right? There's just expectations that people are going to be successful, that they're going to work hard, they're going to do things and actually provide value. And I don't know, like, be successful. It's just sort of like an expectation that if you go to Harvard, everyone expects it of you, but also the people who are there also expected that they were going to leave. And if they went into law school, that they were going to be like, the goal was to be on the Supreme Court or whatever it was, right? Like, everyone just had the highest goals to do different things. And so that was like the unique and interesting part about Harvard for me was seeing that. And I think it still drives me a lot today of thinking about, like, all right, as I'm looking at my career, seeing other people I went to college with, seeing what they're doing now and being like, geez, yeah, like, there's still a long way to go.
So obviously you were sitting in Cambridge dreaming of slinging software, right? Like, that was your goal the whole time?
Yeah, of course. Yep. You had a long planned out path to get here.
Just like John and I. Yeah. It was always the dream.
Yeah, very straightforward, and living my dream now, of course. So, we actually one of my roommates was Al Gore's son, and we had a dinner with Al Gore once, and he went around and asked us all what we wanted to do like after school, and there was a few hockey players who were, Ryan Landon, Noah Welch saying like, want to play in the NHL, go that direction. Dove Grim Morris, our goalie, was, I don't know, talking about working in the government, which he does now. Other people were talking about going to finance, and they came to me, and I said, like, I want to, realistically, I found out that like the different types of hot dog buns on the West Coast. I thought so. I told Al Gore I want to sell hot dog buns on the West Coast when I'm done. And he looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like,
"No, you didn't."
He goes, "You have no idea what you want to do, huh?" I go, "No, I have no clue." He goes, "Yeah, it sounds like it." But to this day, I guess Al says his dad will ask him, "How's the hot dog bun guy doing?" He's like, "Oh, he sells software now, actually." And he's like, that makes so much sense. So,
yeah, it seems to be, it's always a common theme with everybody, including John and I. Like you kind of end up there. It's never on purpose necessarily, but they do say everything happens for a reason. I have zero regrets about it. I'm sure you feel the same way, right?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, this is for me, like I love the idea of like growing companies and software and everything that we do here and that I've been able to do in my career and have found the path to be able to do that. So for me, it's fun, it's exciting. And I mean, that's what I wanted to do coming out of Harvard, was find something like this, and to be able to do it is awesome. So it's, it may not be exactly what we planned or what I thought. I thought maybe more finance like everyone else or something along those lines. But as I started to get deeper in my career, I realized that like building things and doing this is what I love to do. So it's definitely a dream.
Yeah.
So Rob, that's what we talk to a lot of people on the podcast about. So for anyone out there who's listening, they're probably in that phase of life where they're just about to graduate. Maybe it's not Harvard, but they're looking to the job market and thinking, okay, I'm probably done with sports. I'm not going to go to the major leagues or NHL, but what do I do next? So can you talk a little bit about right after school, kind of your transition period?
On that, I want to hear about the SP and the Coast.
Yeah.
We have to hit that.
For me, I was lucky enough to get drafted by the Rangers when I was in school after my freshman year. I went to a bunch of rookie camps with them. I always say now, like I was a 9th round draft pick, and when they renegotiated the deal in 2005, I think they dropped it down to 7 rounds because idiots like me were getting drafted in the 9th round. They're like, yeah, we don't really need that. So, for me, like after school, I was like, all right, went to Hartford, got sent to Wheeling, with, I remember Sean Collins and I were roommates. He was loving it. And I was like, I have to get out of this place. I did not want to be in Wheeling. So,
Wheeling, West Virginia, right?
Yeah. I ended up leaving camp there and like, all right, I'm quitting. I'm done. I'm driving home. Donnie Grover called me. He was in Danbury with the Danbury Trashers. So my first professional game was with the Danbury Trashers, which at the time I knew would be an incredible story. It was one of those things that as soon as I showed up, it was the second year. And so for anyone who's seen the Netflix documentary, I was there for the first part of the second year, and it was a wild time, absolutely wild. Donnie's like, they'll pay you more than you make in the Coast just to like be a practice player here. And I was like, all right, well, I figure out what I'm doing. I'll do that. So I went to Danbury and thought like, all right, this was going to be my transition. I thought I'd be there. And actually I was going down to New York a lot, trying to like actually interview for finance and stuff like that, thinking like, all right, this is not going the direction I want. And I thought at that point is when I would make the change. But hung in Danbury for about until about December. So I got into one game, and then basically with roster rules had to get like cut. And I was like, I'm not going anywhere else in this league. So Liam McCarthy, who was a few years older than me at Harvard, was down in Knoxville playing in the SPHL. And called me up and was like, hey, you should come down here. If you're just going to like ride out the year, just come down here. It's like a blast. We're in Knoxville. It's a college town. It's a lot of fun. And so I went down there and was like, yeah, all right, this is it. Like, this is great. I actually thought like, if I'm going to play one more year, I'll try to go overseas or do something in Europe, which would be fun. But about a month into being in Knoxville, and the SPHL at that point was a it's not like the quality of the league has gone up a lot since I was there. It was probably like the second or third year. And it wasn't that good. It was like, I think one of my fourth or fifth game, I had like a double Gordie Howe. So it was like an interesting league to play in, to say the least. But yeah, so I went down there for like a month, and then like I was doing well, and randomly got a call from San Diego, from the San Diego Gulls, who at the time were in the East Coast League in the ECHL, and they needed someone to come out. So we were literally, our rookie party was in Knoxville on a Saturday night. I got the call at the bar. I was like, all right, yeah, I'll be there tomorrow. Flew out in the morning, played that afternoon, was like not in great shape. And afterwards, the coaches were like, well, you all right? Like, well, this is not what we expected. And I was like, yeah, so we had our rookie party last night. They're like, really? You should have told us. We would have had you come the next day. I was like, so I ended up sticking it out in San Diego for the back half of that year, which was great, actually. San Diego was a phenomenal place to be on the coast at that point. And it's now obviously an AHL team because it should have been. We were getting like 10,000 fans a game on Friday and Saturday nights when the Chargers were done before the Padres picked up. Like, there wasn't a ton going on in San Diego. So people wanted to see sports would come to the Gulls games, and it was a blast. So I was like, all right, this is great. I'll stick around in San Diego and play another year. And like a week before the season, the next year, I'd signed on to play with San Diego again for my second year. I was like, all right, cool. I'm not going overseas. I'm going back to San Diego. And about a week before the season started, the team folded. So just like up, and I guess the owner wanted to potentially sell the land, and it was like 2006. So it was the height of the real estate bubble and everything that was happening with that, where the land that the or San Diego Sports Arena is on is worth like a ton of money, obviously. So they pulled the plug on the season because they didn't want to have a team operating there. And then like it was like a week before the season, like, what am I going to do now? Ended up going up to Long Beach for a little bit and then headed back to Knoxville to ride out the year. So it was the second, but even by the time I got back to Knoxville the second time around, the league was way better than it was the first year. But I knew at that point, like, all right, it was a little disappointing because, like I said, the second year I would have wanted to go overseas and have that experience of playing somewhere in Europe if I was going to do that. But looking back, it was still fun, right? Getting to play in San Diego and do that was awesome. I think if the team hadn't folded, I might still be there. So ultimately, it's worked out well for me and the way that it happened. But yeah, so that's the second year. Just rode out, went back to Knoxville. And essentially after that year, I knew like that was it, and it was time to find a real job.
So I've never heard someone say I had to stick it out in San Diego,
yeah,
first
right.
of all. So
no, I would love to stick it out in San Diego. Yeah.
And then secondly, and we'll get into like your transition to adulthood, but I've actually got to witness Rob's greatest skill that he learned as a pro hockey player by seeing him do karaoke live at Rose and Crown in Nantucket. So can you just quickly tell like what you did going into that rookie party, how you got prepared, and like what you ended up doing? Because I love that.
So that actually started in Danbury. There was not much to do in Danbury when I was there. It's not really a happening place, and there was like some bar that had karaoke on like Tuesday nights, and so like the whole team would go and they'd make the rookies sing karaoke. And I think like I can't remember if they picked the song first or whatever it was, but like they did 1 or 2 weeks of doing it where I just can't sing anything, and it was just terrible, right? Like just getting up there, and that was like the whole point. It was like entertaining for the older guys on the team, I guess. But I was like, if I'm going to do this, I might as well do something. And I couldn't think of like, all right, I can't sing. What could I do? And I'll give a shout out to, I don't know if you know Jack Baker, but this other guy, BU hockey player. I'd seen him once. Literally, I was at a bar around here in Boston, and out of nowhere, this guy comes flying from the back and starts doing "We Didn't Start the Fire," and I thought it was like the best thing ever. So I was like, all right, if I'm going to be forced to do karaoke and I can't sing, I might as well do something that's at least entertaining. So I just basically tried to copy that. So I'm probably revealing this that a lot of people might not know, but it's a total copy of Jack Baker's We Didn't Start the Fire. And from there, just was like, God, I got to learn all the words. That's at least impressive, and was able to do that, and it's become a thing that, I've expanded my repertoire beyond just "We Didn't Start the Fire," but that is the best one. And it all stems from just not wanting to be terrible at karaoke and terrible at singing in Danbury when we had to do it. So,
John, it's unreal. He drops the mic at the end. It's like,
you can do that. That's a tough song. Dude. Like, I was waiting to hear what it was. That is like
awesome. He knows every word. He doesn't even look at the screen, dude. He comes out to the crowd and he just hits every note. It's unreal. I love it. It's
amazing. And I make everyone sing the chorus. I don't even want to sing that. So.
All right. So you finish up pro hockey. Like, once you knew you were hanging up the skates, like, where were you at mentally, emotionally? Like, was it a hard transition? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think for me, it was really, I knew pretty quickly once I started bouncing around the minor leagues that this was like this wasn't going to go in the right direction. Right. Like, and it was something that, I kind of come to terms with over the first year that I was like, all right, this is a good experience. I get to go and play across the country and like enjoy that. And like I said, that's what kind of why I was like thinking like, all right, next year I'll go to Europe. And then the whole San Diego thing happened. I was like, well, I'm not leaving San Diego, so I'm going back. But for me, like, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. Right. Like, I still had no clue what I was going to do after hockey. But a lot of like all the, everyone from Harvard this was 2006, 2007. Everyone was just getting jobs done in finance down in New York. It was just like everyone was getting jobs pretty easily. So it was like, it wasn't even a worry. It was like, all right, when you're done, like, there's going to be something there available. You just have to go work and find a job down in New York. So that was sort of the expectation. It was, and it was tough. I mean, like, I obviously playing hockey my whole life, loving it. It was something that, it was tough to let go, tough to not be part of the team and have all the guys that you hang out with all the time, the camaraderie and everything like that. It was something that, went away. And I think the other thing that went away, and something I've talked to other people about, is like, there's also this, because hockey is a physical sport, the ability to like get aggression out and to do that, like, whether it's not even just fighting, but also just like hitting people and like being aggressive and doing that is something that once that goes away, that's also something that can be even harder for people to find an outlet or find something to do. I've seen it happen with other guys who stop playing hockey, that all of a sudden they start getting into bar fights and different things because they just don't have any outlet for aggression. So there's a lot to it that was like, all right, that I didn't realize at the time, or I guess I didn't realize beforehand, but as I started to transition away from hockey, it was more challenging than I thought. I moved back to Boston after the season ended in Knoxville, and realized like, all right, it's, the next step is to move down to New York, find a way to get down there and find a job. So this was now summer of 2007, starting to go into the fall of 2007. And
so, Rob, you're moving back to Boston.
So I moved back to Boston after the second year, and my brother was heading down to New York to go to law school. So I was like, all right, we'll find a spot. He was looking to, he was getting an apartment down there. It was late 2007. I moved to New York, thinking that there were still jobs available, and ran right into the recession, where the jobs dried up pretty quickly.
That was a bloodbath. That was a bloodbath.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I actually had like a kind of like I just found through some connection, like a temp, almost like internship at a medical device VC firm, venture capital firm down in New York, and was able to see what they were doing, which was basically looking at like companies and building companies and thinking about how that happens, how markets evolve, how things like that work. And it was fascinating to me, and thought it was really cool. So I was like, oh, that's super interesting. This is something I would like to do. And but as everything happened, they didn't have like jobs going forward. They didn't have associate positions that they were handing out. So, so I knew like it was a good was my first. It was really my first like job in the business world was that kind of like temp internship at a VC firm, and I was fascinated by it. Thought it was awesome. So it's kind of been a goal of mine to get into that at some point. It's been start investing in companies, but my path that I'm taking here is like I didn't want to go back to school at that point, and I still am not in favor of business school or anything like that. I'd rather do it from the operating side of actually building companies and learning from being a part of the stuff that we're doing here and that I've been doing in my career. So that was early on. I started to see that. I still had no idea how to do it realistically or how it was going to play out. But I like the idea of venture capital, of the idea of building and growing companies, and figured, all right, that became a goal of mine to get back into it and to figure out a way to do that. So still, nothing. All that dried up. I found like a job at State Street down in New York that I had for about a year. I was still kind of like, all right, well, I want to find a way to try to stick it out here in New York for at least a little bit. And just had like there was a random job at State Street managing a database, which I had zero skills or technical ability to do.
What?
But yeah.
So you're just like bouncing around at this time. I've been there, Rob. I've been like, just like interviewing, like, hey, I could be a quality assurance analyst at a bank. Like I've been there, like, so,
totally.
It's like 2007. You're like, any job is a good job. So what do you remember from that time, like being the hardest part of like, or did you have an idea of where you wanted to go? Or were you just happy to have a job?
Just happy to have a job at that point. For me, like, everyone talks about I even said it earlier on this was, the network from Harvard and particularly the Harvard Hockey Network, and it is really good. It's just like when there's no jobs to hand out, people aren't handing out any jobs, and it was just a challenge to do that. And I realized, like, I think I had an expectation that, like, in something that I think other people have said too is like, oh, if you went to Harvard and played hockey, like, you'll get a job, no problem. Like, someone will have, the network will give you one is sort of the expectation, which is just not how it works at all. Like, you have to work really hard still. You can use the network, but the network isn't just like something that gives you anything, right? Particularly at that time, it was incredibly hard to do that. So I think I found a job posting and applied, like, literally to State Street just for anything. It was in like their hedge fund operations group. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's like related to hedge funds. Maybe was sort of like, maybe the finance would be something I want to do still, and still trying to figure that out. So I'd be able to at least see something around like how hedge funds work. But ultimately, once I got into the seat, it wasn't that at all. It was just like, it was a back end database of stuff that hedge fund clients were owning. And yeah, so I just like, it was actually interesting though, because the job like got me to see a little bit more of the technology side of things, which is ultimately the direction that I ended up going. But it was just part of the reason I also took it, because of the other kind of crappy jobs that are around and are available. Like, that one was at least like somewhat related to other things that I was like, all right, if I don't want to go this direction in finance, at least this is towards the tech side, which is also interesting to me and something that I'd want to do more. And so, but it was hard. Yeah. Like, it was challenging, and I didn't do it. I look back and think I could have done a much better job, like, using the network, really, like, trying to be more. I think I kind of maybe gave up on things a little too quickly, because it was just such like a weird time where there was like, people were like, companies were shutting down. Like, it was just weird what was going on in New York at that point. So, yeah, like, I had a bunch of friends at Lehman Brothers when that shut down, like all that sort of stuff was like great.
So, Rob, I mean, we're kind of, the market's always volatile, and recession aside, like, what are some piece of advice you have for the younger listeners who are kind of like bouncing around and applying on Indeed and, just looking for that job that sounds interesting? Like, do you have any advice on, and if you had to do it again, recession aside, what you would do?
For me, it's like, now I know I know what interests me. I know what I like. I know why I do this. But like at that point in my career, I didn't have that really formed. Like today, and I tell this to people a lot. Like I consider myself like I like to build. I'm a builder. I like to build things. Like that's what I've found that I like to do. And I think like at that point, I had no definition of what I wanted or what I liked, and it's something that had developed as I had experiences to do that. But I didn't even have like a thought or a theory on it or something that I could like kind of at least like I didn't have a coherent story of anything, right? Like there was nothing about me that meant like, why would I take this job or why should you give me an opportunity to do this job? But even if we're like, just other than the fact that that it's part of the network, it's like, it should be like, no, all right, great, we're in the network, but I'm using this because this is something that I'm interested in. This is something I want to go after. And I think like being able to find that earlier is something that is hugely beneficial. To be able to give people in your network or the connections you have a good reason to give you an opportunity to do something, right? Because it fits with something that like you believe that you want to do, as opposed to just like, hey, I need a job.
Right. Try to find a career, not necessarily a job, right?
Yeah.
JR does a good job of coaching people and talking to some of the ship's candidates around. Don't be afraid to say, I want to be a salesperson. You know, like I don't know if it was like this back then for you, Rob, but sometimes after college, it's like you don't really want to say, I want to be in sales. It's want to be an investment banker, you want to be a lawyer, or a doctor, or pre-med, or engineer. But salesperson is kind of like a bad word. So that's good. That's good advice.
Yeah. For like, I think it's talk. I mean, like to talk to as many people too, because like to develop that and understand what someone want to do, like it's hard to know that earlier in your career or when your career is starting. You have no real idea, at least for most people, like for me. And so I think I probably should have done a better job of talking to more people, like going and like actually looking at more things. And I think I like should have started that earlier in my hockey career, probably the summer before. You know, I mean, like. It takes time to really figure that out. And so I think the more conversations you have, the more you understand what people do, the better you're able to like understand how it would work for you or why you think you could be good at it or how it fits into where you want your career to go. Something that changes, obviously, that like, your careers change over time, obviously. There's no question about that. But at least if you have like a theory as to like, you know, for me, again, like part of the reason I work at tech startups is because I like to build things. And that's something that I found out with that VC experience, the early one that I had. But before that, you know, and even at that point, I didn't have that understanding. Like I couldn't tell that story the way I can tell it now. And if I had figured out how to tell that earlier, it would have given me a better reason to go to people and do that. And so but that requires like learning and talking to a lot of people in order to get that information, that understanding that you need to be able to like build that story.
So was your I know your first tech sales job wasn't in startups though, right? Like how did you make that transition into sales specifically?
Yeah. So the first job was at EMC because I still didn't really know where, like I didn't, even with all the startups, but I had no understanding of startups. I didn't know where would I go? What would I do? Which one would I go after? What's the right place to go? And so for me going to EMC as a big company, it was like, okay, you can see a lot and then be able to figure out like what is the right direction to go. What I didn't realize is that part of what happens at big companies is they keep you doing smaller things so that you don't see as much realistically. And like, it's because your job is to do that, like it's to do this one specific thing for that company. Even still, there was exposure enough to other parts of technology with EMC because it is so big that did give me a good understanding of like where to try to go next. But for me, it was like going to EMC was just kind of a foot in the door because I thought it'd be like, all right, something good on the resume that then you can leverage to go to a startup or something like that. You know, when I joined EMC, I joined with a class of like 30 kids who were fresh out of college and me who had been now 5 years out of school. Having gone and played hockey, lived in New York for a couple of years. And so I felt like I was in a little bit of a different spot than everyone who was starting in EMC. And like, one of the things that I talk about with the EMC experience was like early on, senior VPs who were awesome or would come down and, you know, tell all the kids who just started with the classes before me or after me or around me with like, you know, this EMC is this great place. I have friends who left years ago and they always regret it. And they tell me that. And all the kids would eat it up, and I was a little skeptical of it because I'm like, this is the guy who built the place, right? Like, he gets you to stay for another quarter. It's another yacht for him, and like he deserves it because he built the damn thing, right? Like that's sort of like how I saw it. Was like the people who were able to like build it and grow it and do that are the ones who really get like all the spoils, and so to speak. And so, for me at that time when I would say when I joined EMC at that point, like the upside of the good run as I saw it, or as it seemed to me, was like if you had a good career at EMC when I joined, everything else I felt like it had been written. Like the people that built it. The story was kind of told already. And for me, it just seemed like a good run at EMC would be you get in your mid 40s, like be middle management and have a mustache, and like there you go. And I have alopecia, so I can't grow a mustache. So it was like, all right.
Do you like Rob? Do you like the big company or small company? Yeah. I think I know the answer, but a lot of our listeners are like,
yeah.
A lot of the listeners are like, hey, should I go, John, JR? Do I go to a startup or do I go work at Oracle or Microsoft? Right?
Yeah,
you get that all the time.
For me, it's absolutely the startup. There's no question. I did the EMC experience was. Like I said, I thought it was a good idea to get a foot in the door, and it was at some level, but it was very early on. I knew it wasn't for me. I think with my first deal there, I broke 6 different rules that they had in terms of like what you could do. JR, you probably don't know this, but like I went direct, which JR knows we had to go through partners.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah. The product we weren't supposed to sell on our team, like everything was wrong with it, and people were like, "Oh, you're gonna get fired." And I like, and Trevor Bobwick, who was my manager at the time, was like, "No, they're gonna celebrate you for doing something like this. Is the same people who built it, like that's what they did." And then the difference is like that's what everything's like at a startup. That was like one deal, and outside of that, I was like sort of slap on the wrist, don't do this again. But for when you're at like a growing startup, you're just trying to get creative and find different ways to get business in the door and to make things happen. And to me, it gives you more freedom, but it also allows you to try different things, to learn different things, to do a lot of different stuff. Again, with EMC at that point, it was like they had defined what the role was. Like you do that very well, you get to find another role and do the next thing and move up. With startups, it's like you have to be doing a lot. Like you see a lot outside of just what's inside your role. And it gives people in the right startup in a growing environment, like people can grow and learn very quickly.
Did your like life as an athlete, did it immediately help as a salesperson? You feel like and like what about it was like so obvious that you were like, okay, this is just like sports. I get this.
Yeah, I think the idea of competing with other people who are on your team at some level too. But working together, with any team sport, there's only a certain number of roster spots, or there's only a certain number of spots on like the power play or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's only a certain number of people who can do it within each team, but everyone else on the team is still important. And so you have to learn to like work together and know that like if you're competing with yourself and getting better, like it doesn't matter. You don't have to like root against other people on your team. You can root for them and still know that like, but I still want to strive to be better than them, to be part of it. To like position yourself to do that, to just like do better, to be at the top of the leaderboard. So I think like the idea of learning how to be a team player, but at the same time too, like how to drive and excel through myself.
Rob, I always like to ask every guest, like, it's just like hockey, right? Like you used to bury people. Like we always have one skill that we kind of are proud of. Like, what would you say from a sales perspective that you're elite at?
Yeah, for me, it's getting creative and finding solutions. And that's why like, when the rules got strict at the bigger companies, it became more of a challenge. That's why I love startups, because when you're in a growth mindset and the risk of not finding an answer is like that the company could go out of business, you have to, like, it forces you to get creative and find ways to sell to people, to provide value, to show them that like this is worth them buying. And it's not always like super straightforward. So I ended up at a company called Backupify, which is the catalyst for like a lot of the growth in my career, where was lucky enough to join that. I saw that it was like a growing industry. It was cloud technologies, as that was starting to become a much bigger thing. But we were selling data backup for companies that had moved to the cloud, and a lot of times so they wouldn't need to back up their data. And we had to find other ways to show that there was value there. And so like we created stories, but we created use cases and different things for them to use to be able to understand like why they would still purchase it and buy it. One of those being like we found a way that like just by talking to a lot of people and over a long period of time, understanding that like they were spending money on stuff they didn't need to if they could reallocate it to this. And it was just like, that took a lot of like trying to get creative and figure out ways that it could be valuable of just talking to people and saying, particularly at a startup as you're trying to do that, like just like, what happens if we did this? Well, what if we did this? And just like trying to get creative and always pushing that is something that all of a sudden someone's like, oh my God, if you could do that, like that would be incredible. And then you're like, actually, we can do that. Now you start to position it that way and you find that that's like something that's more valuable to them. So it's, for me, that's the thing that has been what I've excelled at in my career, is just like continuing to push on those conversations, being super interested, trying to be interesting enough so they don't just hang up or leave the call, but at least give me the information and that they trust and respect that I'm doing the right work to try to find a solution here, and will give me the transparency and visibility to meet that.
You bring up a good point about that mindset of just kind of finding a way. I mean, I remember when I was playing high school ball and we played BC High, and they were like, I used to knock kids over in the Hockey Mock League down in Mansfield, and we played BC High and their tight end was 6'6", 285 going to Penn State. And I was like, I can't block this kid. So we had to figure out a way, like a scheme on the offensive line of what to do or what plays to run around him. And like, you just try to, nothing's easy on the field and nothing's easy in sales. So I think being tenacious, it's a great quality to have. So, I mean, in terms of, bending the rules, breaking the rules, what other unpopular opinions does Rob Flynn have in sales that might not suit well for, the prototypical
2022 grad? I think you know where we're headed with this one, Rob.
Oh, yeah, mine's obvious. I mean, for me, and this is something that we do here at LinkSquares, is we're in the office 5 days a week. We have 5 days a week in the office. I think early in my career, if I was trying to learn how to sell and do that working from home, it would have been an absolute disaster. I don't understand how that can happen today for someone who's just starting to learn how to like sales again, because all the stuff I'm talking about, getting creative and doing that, comes from just constant conversations. If you're at home, like not just with customers or prospects, but like with everyone else around you too. What are you hearing? What are you hearing? What's going on here? Like, what can we do? It's just to like, you just pick up so much being around people that early in my career, if I was trying to do that working from home, it just would have been a failure. And I can tell you 100% that I wouldn't be here today if that was the case. So, I know that working from home and remote lifestyles are great. There's a lot of people who are touting that as a massive benefit. But we've gone the exact opposite direction, and we're 5 days a week in the office for a reason. We just found that we could be somewhat effective at home, but the people who were effective were the ones who were more experienced. The newer people who were just starting out, it was a massive challenge for them. And at this point in my career, would I like to work from home more? Yeah, I would. That'd be great. If a family at home, it'd be good to do that. But like, that'd be a disservice to the newer people on our team who are trying to grow and do it, and build their career.
Listen, I get it. It's 2022. Everybody wants to take lunch and work a real estate agent's schedule, but you got to earn it. I think, personally, right? My whole opinion is if you're 22 to 26 years old, you're new in your career, you don't have a mortgage or a family, and you have an opportunity to move to a new city, and like you said, Rob, be around your peers, your managers. And we used to call it at Turbonomic, we used to call it learning through osmosis. You couldn't sit on the sales floor and not learn. You would have to try to not learn just from listening to other people's conversations, just to listening to other people's phone calls. I get the remote work thing, but I struggle with it because I think it's like, you're right, Rob. If that's something important to you in your life, then you can have that in tech sales eventually, right? But you need to kind of build a foundation around your peers, right? Like, that's kind of my opinion for these folks that are early in their career. It's okay to like make a change for a couple years, get out of your comfort zone, and go learn around other people. That's my opinion, John.
I agree. I think it's almost like grad school. When you get out there, it's like you don't want to just start grad school or start college as a remote student. A lot of people today are going to college online, and kids are going to Harvard last couple of years online, and that's like that. It's cool, but you probably learn way more, in the dorms, walking the halls. I know it's a pandemic, so I understand that, but I'm just saying, like, after college, after sports, you should be around other people that are kind of in the same boat as you, and you do have to earn it a little bit. I remember when I started playing football, I wanted to be number 55, and they were like, the senior captain, middle linebacker is 55. You're a freshman. Like, you gotta carry the bags,
earn it.
Like, you're not. 100%. You gotta earn it. So,
do you know why most, in my opinion, and I know a few other people feel the same way, and it's not a popular opinion, is that like the reason why a lot of sales teams are going remote is not because of the like entry level employees, like the AEs, the account executives, the BDRs who want to do it. It's because the managers don't want to be in the office, right? Because it's easier for me in this stage of my career if I were to work from home. It certainly is, right? But like, that's not. I worked for great mentors, Chris Hessler, a number of other people who like were dedicated to helping us grow in a way that like I owe it to the team here to give it back to them, to be here to spend the time with them. I mean, my schedule is more flexible now. Like, as one of the leaders of the sales team here, so like that naturally happens as you earn it, and it's totally part of it. But like, if we were to just work remotely and get rid of our office, it would benefit me more, but it would totally hurt the team. And so like, that's why most companies are doing it, is because it actually helps the management. And that's who's making the rules. Learn,
earn, and return, dude. I couldn't agree more. And you're in your return phase now, and it's going to continue. And you guys are building an awesome engine out there in LinkSquares. All right, we're at the end. I want to ask one last question. We always talk about, it's like a hockey analogy my dad used to say when I was little. He's like, listen, a lot of people play hockey, but there's not a lot of hockey players, right? And that's about like being a pro, right? Like, even at like 9 years old, my dad would talk to me and my brothers about being a pro. And we talk to our candidates that are fresh, kind of coming into tech sales, about like, listen, you can sell technology or you can be a technology sales professional. Very different things. What does being a pro in this business, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, it means being interested and being interesting, right? Like, being interested in the technology, actually being interested in what people are like, what they care about, and then being interesting in yourself, like being able to bring your own personality in a way that like it sets you apart, but it makes you interesting to them, and that they can, like, again, they can tell you've put in the time and effort, that they respect that work that you've done, that makes you credible and gives you, like, allows them to trust you, that you're not going to waste their time because you know what you're talking about, right? Like, and that requires being dedicated to it, and not just saying like, all right, I'll show up tomorrow and make the dials or do whatever. It's like, no, I'm immersing myself in, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm doing different things that are like making me really understand and be actually interested in what I'm doing, and allows me to be interesting in return.
I love that answer, dude. I have a whole course, Be Interested. That's like, literally, we talk about that, podcast, read books, it's awesome.
And be interesting is such good advice, Rob, because I remember there was a point in my career where I was so focused on selling software. I remember I had a meeting with someone and they asked me like, so what do you got going on this weekend? And I didn't even know. Like, I was like, deals. And it sounded so bad, but like, it's all I was doing. And I was like, man, I'm this boring software salesperson. Like, I need to get some hobbies, or I need to like talk about my life, because I was just so focused on the deal. So I think that's very important. People don't want to just talk to somebody who's just professional sales. They want to talk about kids and construction and families and stuff like that. So sports, whatever. I think that's a really good point. I haven't heard somebody say that before.
That was awesome. Rob, unreal, buddy. Thank you so much, man. That was great. We appreciate you coming on with us, my man.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
Who would have thought years ago at Kohl's we'd be sitting here talking about our careers, huh?
I did.
I did, too. I love it. All right, man. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
This wraps up this episode of Merchants of Change. If you enjoyed this episode, the most meaningful way to say thanks is to submit a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're interested in working with us, please come find us at www.shiftgroup.io.